Hello guys, and welcome to another Blackrock Foundry Mythic Guide from Method. Today we're talking about the Beastlord Darmac. Probably the easiest boss in the whole instance. There is a lot of things, a lot of mechanics in this fight, but pretty easy overall. Once you get the hang of it, shouldn't be too hard to kill it.
For Beastlord, you're going to want to run 3 tanks. 2 tanks to handle the animals, and 1 tank to handle the little beasts that come running in the room every now and then. Also 5 healers, and the rest you fill with DPS that has good AoE or cleave to kill the animals.
Yeah, you don't really need too much class stacking. You can probably kill this boss with whatever setup you have, your best geared characters. Now the way this fight works is that Darmac is gonna choose one of his 3 beasts and jump on it when he reaches 85% HP. And it's up to you to choose which beast he will jump on by being the closest one to him. And depending on which beast you choose first, second and third, he will gain different abilities. But there are a few abilities which stay the same throughout the whole fight, no matter what rotation you do. And those are the pin down, which are some spears falling from the sky, and if a player is standing in them, you're gonna get pinned down. So you don't want to get pinned down. Watch out, look at the ground and be aware of that. And the second one is the Call the Pack, which will just spawn a bunch of very easy to kill beasts, which you just AoE down, like there's nothing to it. We'll be talking about the order that we did it, and it's most likely the easiest one you can do, so just follow this order of beasts. So when the boss is at 85%, you want to make sure that the beast which is closest to him is the wolf, which is called Cruelfang. And as soon as he hits 85%, he's going to jump on it, and you cannot target the boss anymore, you can only target the beast.
Now Cruelfang works the same way as in Heroic and Normal. He has the same abilities, Rend and Tear, which is the leap where he jumps into a ranged camp and then back to the tank and applies a bleed debuff to everyone around him. He also does Savage Haul, which applies a frenzy buff to himself and the other animals around, so you're gonna have to dispel the wolf. But the change for Mythic this time is that the boss, the Beastlord, will come down when the wolf is at 40% instead of sitting on top of him until he dies. So once the boss comes down and Cruelfang casts Savage Haul, they're both going to be affected by the frenzy, so you're going to need 2 dispels, one on the boss and one on the wolf.
Yeah, you can have either the hunters or the druids, just dispel it as soon as it comes up and you'll be fine.
Now once Cruelfang dies and the boss is obviously not on top of him anymore, he's going to go into some short RP and then he will keep and get the ability Rend and Tear, so he's going to be jumping around from then on out and the rest of the fight.
Yeah, every time you kill one of these beasts, the boss is going to get one of their abilities and also some passive buff for the rest of the fight. So, yeah, he keeps the Rend and Tear from the Cruelfang, and he also gains a buff which increases his attack speed by 50% for the rest of the fight.
Now one easy tip to handle Rend and Tear in this case is either you can have a monk which just rolls away as the boss jumps away, or some tank with a sprint, and you can outrun the Rend and Tear as it jumps back. This means you don't need to tank swap as you get too many stacks. Of course it's not needed, and tank swaps, it's not that hard. You're already running 3 tanks, so there's 2 tanks to swap the bosses easily with.
Yeah, the thing you need to keep in mind is that the raid needs to be spread out while the boss is able to cast Rend and Tear, because you don't want to get more than 1 stack of that debuff, and if you stand too close to another person, you're gonna spread it to him.
Now once this is all under control and you get the boss down and the wolf down, as soon as the boss hits 65%, we want the next animal to be mounted, which is going to be Iron Crusher, which is the Elek or the elephant, whatever you want to call it, and which is on the opposite side of the wolf. So you want to be near there, so you do not want Dreadwing yet.
Now once the boss jumps on top of Iron Crusher, he will stop doing the Rend and Tear, so you can forget about that. The boss will only cast it when he is actually targetable. So the new abilities that Iron Crusher is doing are again the Tantrum, which is the AoE damage to the whole raid. Then there is Stampede, where he charges one of the players and knocks them back. And he will also do a Crash Armor debuff on the tanks.
Yeah, for the Crush Armor debuff, you can just tank swap at 2 stacks. It doesn't really matter too much. Sometimes it drops off at 1 even, and you can swap sooner. The Iron Crusher stacks are really not a big harm to the tanks.
Now remember, once Iron Crusher reaches 40%, the boss Darmac is gonna jump off him and he will start casting Rend and Tear again, which means that the raid needs to be spread out, but there's a possibility that Iron Crusher is gonna cast Tantrum at the same time, so make sure that you are ready for that damage because the raid cannot stack at that point. And when you finally kill Iron Crusher, then the boss, Darmac, is gonna gain a new ability, which is the Tantrum. The good news is that he won't cast Rend and Tear together with Tantrum ever, so there's no more fear of those 2 abilities coming at the same time. So when Rend and Tear is coming, you can be spread out, and if there's a Tantrum, you can just gather up and heal it. Also, the passive buff that the boss gets from Ironcrusher when it dies, this time it is a 25% damage increase, permanent, for the rest of the fight.
Now once you've killed Ironcrusher and the boss is alone again, he will mount Dreadwing at 45% this time. Since this is the last animal alive, it doesn't really matter where you position the boss because he'll always go there. It's important that once he does mount Dreadwing that you drag him to the middle of the room, because the first thing Dreadwing is going to do is an Inferno Breath, and you want your range to be spread out and not be all hit by it.
Yeah, so Dreadwing is arguably the hardest animal to deal with. That's why we're leaving it for last. The Inferno Breath that he does, it stacks up, so you do need the raid to quickly dodge it and have as few people as possible get hit. And Dreadwing will also cast Conflags to 3 random people. We all remember the Conflags from back in UBRS on the last boss, General Drakisat thing. The way you deal with those is just insta-dispel them as fast as possible. A good idea is to have assignments for the healers and an add-on marking the players, the 3 players that get it, so that they know which one to dispel. The last ability that Dreadwing has is called Searing Fangs, and it's just a tank debuff. It just forces you to tank swap every now and then. The first time you should swap around 8 stacks, and then as soon as it falls off, just keep taunt switching until the beast is dead. And keep in mind, the Darmac is going to jump off it at 40% once again, so keep in mind the Rend and Tears, which means you need to spread. Keep in mind the Tantrums, you need some raid healing. But once Dreadwing is finally dead, the boss is going to get his Inferno Breath as his new ability. But it has a new name, it's called Superheated Shrapnel. It's basically the same thing, just need to dodge it.
Not only does the boss gain the new Inferno Breath ability, but also the Call the Pack gets empowered. When the little animals die, they will leave a fire patch behind on the floor, so you're gonna have the tank that's tanking those, not tank it on top of the boss so the melee might die, just tank it right next to the boss, outside of the people, outside of the raid, so no one gets hurt by that.
I mean, Liz need to be really careful with those things. Also, the boss, well, let's just say basically he goes on fire. So, the 2 abilities that we mentioned at the start, the pin down and the call pack, they're both becoming fired up. So, yeah, as we mentioned, the pack beasts are gonna leave some fire on the ground, and the pin downs, the spears, the heavy spears, they're gonna also be in flames, and they're gonna shoot some flames to the raid. Doesn't matter too much, just make sure that you kill them in time. As we said, Moonkins, multi-dotting, whatever, cleaving them down is a good idea.
It's not only a good idea, it's pretty much required if you want to actually kill the boss, because leaving them up too long, it's gonna kill the raid.
Now once all of this is said and done, the boss will find a new beast which is only in Mythic. Once you hit 25%, he's gonna call in Fault Line, which is basically a massive Kodo, and it's gonna spawn from the gate right on the opposite side of the entrance. Now the good news is that this time he will not jump off it at 40%. Instead, he will stay on top of it until the beast is actually dead. Now that's the good news. The bad news is that there are some new abilities that Fault Line does. And first off, you have the Cannonball Barrage. That is just some circles on the ground and he just shoots some balls. So basically just avoid the stuff on the ground, just like the pin downs.
Be a sidestep king, as we would like to call it in Method.
Yeah, the next ability is called Epicenter, and that is just a circle right in the center of where the boss is tanked at that moment, and it just does damage to you if you stand in it. Now what that forces you to do is just do some room management. So you don't want to spawn them in the middle of the whole room. You want to tank the boss where it spawns and slowly work your way towards the middle by spawning these epicenters, one next to another.
Now just like all the other beasts, this one also has a tank ability. In this case it's Heavy Smash. It's on a timer. If you have some boss mods or add-ons, you can see the timer, and once he casts Heavy Smash, it will hit the main target and the closest target for some heavy damage. So this is why you need to make sure that the 2 tanks that are tanking Fault Line are close together, and then the 3rd tank is of course still handling Call of the Packs that are still coming into the room.
Now the last thing that the Kodo does is an ability called Unstoppable. That is just a buff that it gets every few seconds that increases his damage by 10%, and it stacks up. Every time he gets one of those stacks, he will also slow the whole rate down, and that can make it tricky to avoid the Cannonball Barrages and the pin downs. So just be ready for it. Good idea here is to use your Aspect of the Foxes and your Stampeding Roars to avoid this damage. Finally, when you kill the Fault Line, it's the final phase of this fight. And damn, there's a lot of phases here. But once that beast is dead, it's only you and the boss.
Now because the Beastlord gains this 100% increase in health, this fight is not going to just fall over. It's actually going to be quite a while before you can kill him. So you're going to have to actually take care of every ability that he's going to be doing. First of all, he's going to be doing the rend and tear, so tanks have to be aware of when he's going to jump, and the raid needs to spread out when he might be doing that. Then he's also going to be casting Tantrum, so when he casts Tantrum, the healers need to heal the raid, keep the raid up, and maybe even stack up at that point. Then he's going to be casting Superheated Shrapnel, which is the bread. So every time you know there's a bread coming, there's timers for it. You need to be ready to move away and move out of the bread. What we do in this video here is we move the boss, keep it in the center of the lane basically, from the exit to the entrance. So range can spread out left and right and they can easily move away from the bread. This also leaves the path where we are going to be placing the epicenters, because you're still going to be doing these and they last until the end of the fight. So you're going to still slowly move towards the entrance, one epicenter at a time, and hopefully you kill the boss by the time you reach the entrance.
Basically, this phase is probably the hardest out of all of them, because maybe the boss is low HP and that helps with executes, but all of these abilities together, and keep in mind, he still has the 50% attack speed, he still has the 25% damage done buff, and his skill is stacking up even more damage with the Unstoppable every few seconds. You really need to play at your best here. A good idea is to look at the timers, and if you see a rend and tear coming up, the raid needs to spread out. If the rend and tear has been done and you see that a Tantrum isn't coming, you can quickly stack up, because there is no fear about stacking up at that point, and then as soon as it's done, you can spread out again.
And we haven't mentioned it yet, but this is definitely the phase where you're going to want to use Bloodlust or Heroism, depending on your faction. Now for this fight, there are quite some debuffs you might want to keep track of. For the raid and the healers and the tanks, it's rend and tear. So if you get a stack, you know you're taking damage, and the tanks maybe you need to swap when you have 2 stacks, for example. That's for Cruel Fang. And then Iron Crusher for the tanks only, it's Crush Armor, which is the debuff where you're going to swap around 2 stacks for. Then we have Dreadwing. This one got 2 debuffs. First one is Inferno Bread. This is the one you get when you stand in the bread. So if you get it, you're either standing wrong or you get the first tick, which you might be getting at that point. And the second debuff is Searing Fangs. Again, this is only for the tanks, this debuff. Make sure you track it and tank swap when needed. Then there's also a debuff for the healers on Dreadwing, which is Conflagration. This is one you're going to want to dispel as soon as you can. Don't let it linger on any raid members, because they're just going to be wandering around mindlessly taking damage.
Oh yeah, you'll definitely hear some screaming of "Dispel, dispel me!" if you don't dispel it too fast. But yeah, that's all the debuffs you need to worry about. Now, couple of quick tips for this boss. As we said, first of all, it's a very easy boss, so don't really worry too much about it. It might seem too much to handle, but it really isn't. One thing that is really important, if you don't want to feel like a noob and getting pinned down, you should get a weak aura that tells you when they're about to happen. So you can have a mental note, oh, the pin downs are incoming, maybe put a sound in there. We're going to have a link on the description with one of the weak auras that we used. Yeah, just make sure you don't get pinned down. If you do happen to get pinned down, then you need to call it out and kill the spear that is impaling you at that time before it kills you.
The second tip we have is for the tanks and the rend and tear. I mentioned it briefly before that monks can roll away from it and other tanks can sprint or leap away as he's coming back. The easy way to avoid it is, as soon as the boss jumps away, you either roll or you press your leap ability at that point, because he's going to be almost definitely jumping back a second later. Sometimes he delays it and there's nothing you can do about it, you're gonna just have to take a stack then.
But yeah, that wraps it up for this boss. Good luck, and as always, if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below.
And remember to subscribe if you want to be kept up to date for any upcoming guides that we're going to be making for Foundry.